All right. Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is going to be for the spoiler review of Glass. Yes, this is all spoilers. If you haven't seen the film, why are you watching this review? I did a spoiler-free one yesterday. You can watch it there. But I am not alone for this one. As I said, I do have a guest with me. I thought I was going to have multiple guests, but I only have one. And he has been on my channel a ton, so it's cool to have him here. Here is Diego Coya.
Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Diego Coya. I've been here on this channel only once.
Yep.
I believe it was a fall movie preview.
October movie preview, yeah.
Okay, yeah, it was the October movie preview, and I had a fun time on that one. So
Yeah.
I'm back to be on today for a Glass spoiler review. I'm definitely back. I'm happy to be back because this is a movie I was very excited for. I saw it yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
It's the type of movie that has a lot of different reactions, and no matter what your reaction is, I feel like people are going to want to talk about this movie because a lot
absolutely. It's a huge conversation starter for sure.
Yeah, a lot happens, and a lot of unexpected things for me happened too, like the direction the movie took. So I'm excited to talk about it with Kevin, and yeah, hopefully have a good podcast.
Right. So we've both seen Glass, as Diego mentioned, and there really is a lot to get into here. Not as much as say like Infinity War. It's not going to be that long because not nearly as much happens as like that film. But this was a film that I really did have a lot to say about. It got a very strong reaction out of me, good ways and bad. And I'm just going to jump into it now. The interesting thing about this film, unlike Infinity War, is that the two of us feel a bit differently about some things, which I actually kind of like. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is something I forgot to bring up. I'm going to get to the ending, obviously, because that's like the main thing that people want to hear about. But the one thing I forgot to bring up in my review, and I was going to put it in there, but I said, you know what, I'm doing a spoiler review. I'll just talk about it then. For me, as much as I love the first 15 to 20 minutes of this movie, like I said in my review, I think adding an additional 20 minutes would have helped. And I think that applies to them actually getting to the hospital. I think a little bit more time actually could have been, we could have had a little bit more time before they got there. I would have liked to see just a little bit more maybe going on with David, a little bit more interaction between him and the Beast, because when they got to the hospital, I was like, wow, they're already here. Like, it's not a huge hindrance on the film, but I think if a little bit more time was actually spent there, it actually would have helped the film a little bit. I like the breakneck pacing. I definitely enjoyed that. But I just felt a little bit more time could have been spent before we got to the hospital. And I don't know if that's just me, but overall, I liked what we got there. But like I said, I think they could have spent a little bit more time. The big thing to talk about, of course, is what they decide to do with Glass. The movie is called Glass, and on paper you'd be like, well, why is the movie called Glass? Now we'll get to that, of course, but Mr. Glass himself does not appear in this movie until like I think 30 to 40 minutes in. Pretty much, you see sort of like little point of view shots, but you don't actually see him until they get to that big sort of scene where it's the three of them and Sarah Paulson's talking to them. And I thought that was actually really cool the way they did that. You're waiting for his big return. You're waiting for his entrance. And I thought they handled that suspense pretty well. I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
About his appearance for the first time.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, he's not in the movie as much as you would expect. Like, he's not in the first, like you said, he's not in the movie until like the first 30 or 40 minutes. But but even then, like you said, there was POV shots of him. But I thought his introduction was really cool. That shot of, like you said, of James McAvoy, Samuel Jackson. Like, I love that shot. There's a lot of shots in this movie that I love. Particularly
for sure.
Particularly one of my favorite shots of the movie was when James McAvoy and Samuel L. Jackson, they're in the basement, and Samuel Jackson's wheeling away as chaos is going behind him. I thought that
was a great shot.
It was a great one. I will say about this, because you said something about the first 15 minutes, the first 20 minutes. What I liked so much about those 20 minutes was how they showed you what David Dunn was up to. I've been up to for like the past 19 years since the first Unbreakable movie.
That was great.
I will say one of the few flaws I had with it was that I felt like there was not really an arc for David Dunn. Like,
No,
yes,
yeah. That's something I was gonna touch upon is you know, you guys heard in my review, I said there is one thing they introduced with David Dunn that they never come back to, and that is the whole thing with his wife. I loved the idea that he will just randomly see like his wife in visions and she'll be speaking to him and he'll have a conversation with her. What a great idea that was, because obviously, you know, she now knows. Obviously, he told her off screen about him being a superhero and things like that. And I was hoping we'd get just one extra scene with that, maybe more of him talking to her. But unfortunately, they never came back to it. And that did disappoint me because I really liked that idea. And I thought it was really cool the way it played into the story of him, you know, talking to his wife. And I thought, okay, this is a really cool idea. There's a lot they can set up there, but it's really just setup. Like that's all it is. They show it once and then they don't really go back to it. And that's another thing where if Shyamalan were to release that 3-hour cut, I guarantee there are more scenes of David Dunn talking to his wife. And I think that would have been great if they did that, especially since Robin Wright is so fucking good in Unbreakable. And the fact that they don't have more of her, you know, the fact they included her, I was like, holy shit, she's actually gonna be a part of this movie. I was not expecting that. And they just kind of show her that once, and I just don't think that made sense for the character, especially considering the relationship that they had in Unbreakable. I think if there was one thing they could have focused on was him and his wife, you know, how he really feels about this, how he's maybe is blaming himself for her death and how he's haunted by her visions. I think it would have been a really cool thing to see, but unfortunately they never came back to it. And like you were touching upon, yeah, they really do sideline David Dunn in this movie. He's not really a big part of it. And again, I would not have a problem if it's supposed to be, you know, an Unbreakable sequel where he's basically, you know, supposed to be the main character. And the film starts off as if he's the main character. Like you think this is going to be David Dunn's movie. But the second they get to that mental hospital, there are scenes where we see him, but they never really did as much with him. And it just really let me down. And of course, we'll get to the one thing that really ruined that and really made the lack of screen time that much more bothersome. But for me, yeah, I really wanted a lot more with him. And I think they could have shown they could have done so much with him. And instead, they really sidelined him. And that really did disappoint me. Hello? I don't know where Diego went. Oh, there we go.
I'm sorry. I don't know if it's my internet or if
I don't know. It keeps like cutting out. I don't know, but what do you have to say about David Dunn?
yeah. Well, like I said, I thought Bruce. Well, here's what I'll say. Bruce Willis, I thought it's a good thing because I feel like not since Moonrise Kingdom or Looper has he given like a very good performance in a movie. I feel
Yeah,
like
no, this is the best he's been in years for sure.
Yeah, I feel like the past couple of years he's kind of just been, you know, kind of just winging it in his performances.
Yeah, he just hasn't really cared like at all. Like compare this to like Death Wish last year. They're not comparable. It's like they're two separate actors.
Right. Yeah. So in this movie you can see like a lot of effort that he puts into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what makes it all the more unfortunate is that you don't see him a lot.
There was this maybe one thing I would have liked to have seen was because I like the fact how the son plays the story, like how he's helping him. But I would have seen maybe what if maybe it's just me, but what if David Dunn's son had like a problem?
Yeah.
Doing and they talked about know, the I had with it. I overall really liked the movie though. I liked it a lot.
Oh yeah.
And this movie is definitely different than what I expected. I don't know exactly what I expected. I guess I expected maybe a kind of a big showdown, which kind of does happen.
You do get that, yeah, just not in the way you really expect.
No, but I also appreciate that too. That it was more character driven than like your typical superhero movie, which is good because Split and Unbreakable are not like Infinity War or an MCU movie. You know, they're like, yes, they're part of the superhero genre, but they are more about the characters and they're like dramas or in this case a thriller or horror movie and whatnot. So I like that Glass kind of kept that you know, that what's the word? I guess that streak, for lack of a better term. Yeah, I thought James McAvoy was a standout.
Absolutely, yeah. He is just incredible. I mean, he has even
better here than he was in Split, if I'm being honest.
Honestly, yeah. Like in this one, dude, the scene where there's that light and they're turning it off, they're turning it on, you know, over and over again. He's switching through different personalities. It's astounding. Like there's literally a whole part in the movie where he's speaking Spanish, and I'm like, how does this guy not have at least some sort of award for this? Like, this is actually incredible. And you forget that it really is the same actor. You forget that he's inhabiting all these different personalities. He's just that convincing in the role. And to see him go from Spanish to, hey, we almost got you, bro, and like this like big like party guy like in a second, like that's real acting right there. I don't know how he's able to do it, but it's absolutely incredible. I don't honestly like he's already, I know it's only January, but he's already going to get massively snubbed, and it really is a shame because he's just absolutely incredible here. And I will definitely agree with you. I think he's the best thing about the movie. And not only that, I think Kevin is the best character in this movie, without a doubt. I think out of all the characters, you know, Glass is in a lot, but this is really Kevin's movie. He plays a very specific role in the film, much more than you are really expecting. And that's something that I did really like getting into. I especially like that we actually got to see a lot more of Kevin Wendell Crumb himself. There are, you know, obviously in Split, we only really saw that once, but here there's at least 3 instances where he actually gets to be Kevin Wendell Crumb, and we actually get to see that persona of him, which I really like seeing. I mean, you see he's someone who he's just really, he doesn't want to be a part of this. He uses these other personalities as a way to hide himself from the world, as a way to shield himself. And I thought that was just such a great idea. Obviously, all the trauma he's been through, he doesn't want his actual self to be out in the world. So he uses these personalities as a way to, again, under the guise of trying to hide, you know, who he really is. And I think it's just such a great idea. I love what they did with that. I loved his interactions with Anya Taylor-Joy. And I really like that we got to see a lot more of just Kevin Wendell Crumb on his own, but also getting to see a lot more of Hedwig. That was great too. I think
he plays that character with all the characters well, but with Hedwig, he knocks it out of the park.
Oh, he's the best. Yeah, I think out of all the personalities, Hedwig is just the best. Whether it's him just talking about like the music he's listening to or him roller skating and things like that. I mean, he's just so fun to watch. And again, just hearing the different voices that McAvoy is able to do, there's so much care and so much he employs into this film. And it blew me away. Like far and away, he is absolutely the best thing about this movie. And I think even people that didn't like the movie pretty much agree that James McAvoy is basically the standout, and he absolutely deserves all the awards. And I really loved what we had with him. The interactions between him and Mr. Glass, I really loved a lot. And all that stuff is really well done. Like the scene where Glass finds out that, you know, that there is this persona called the Beast, and he wants to try to use the Beast to his advantage. That stuff's great. You know, the scene where they're trying to find a way to get out of the hospital, all of that stuff is so well done. And that's why the David Dunn stuff is so much more frustrating, because the other stuff in this movie, the interplay between Mr. Glass and between, you know, Kevin, it's so strong that the David stuff, it just falls flat. And as much as I was enjoying it, there were points this morning where I'm like, where the fuck is David? Why haven't we seen him in a while? Isn't he supposed to be a part of this movie? Wasn't Samuel Jackson credited last? Isn't Bruce Willis like credited second? Like what? I don't know what happened here exactly. It's very strange that he is not in the film that much. And that leads me to the thing that I think we can both agree, for me at least, is the worst part of this movie, and that's Sarah Paulson's character. Now, look, I like Sarah Paulson a lot. I think she's a very good actress. I really did like her in this film, but it has to be said, her character is just not very interesting at all. She's basically just Hydra. That's really all she is. She's someone who actively is trying to rid the world of superheroes, and that's really all she does. Every single scene with her in this film, even with its Anya Taylor-Joy, it's like, oh, this isn't really happening, you know. Oh, when she's like to Joseph Dunn, she's like, oh, your mother died and there's been grief. Don't you think that's connected somehow? And I was just like laughing at her the whole time. Like the fact that she actually thought that this is what was going on and was trying to convince them, it's laughable. And again, we spend way too much time with that character. And I would not be complaining if it wasn't in service of a much more complex and well-developed character in David Dunn. Ellie Staple just does not compare at all. I really was not a huge fan of her. I thought she honestly did get quite annoying at points. Again, I like Paulson in this role, but her character, I just was not big on at all. I did not care about her. And again, it goes back to M. Night adding an extra 20 minutes into this movie. If he was able to do that, I think that the film, you know, we could have had more with Staple. And when things aren't going right for her, even though we're not supposed to be rooting for her, we do feel kind of bad. There's never a point in this movie where I actually cared about her. Every time she was on screen by herself, I'm just like, go away. Let's get back to interesting stuff, because she was just so whatever to me, and I just did not really care about her.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, I do agree with you that she gave a good performance.
Yeah.
And I do think a few, like, if they only had maybe one or two scenes of her, you know, saying your superpowers are not real or whatever, that would have been fine. But you're right. There's a lot of scenes like that. And it's just
literally every scene with her is like that.
Yeah. And I feel like if they had lowered some of those scenes, well, cut off some of those scenes and focused more on Dunn and what they can do with this character, I think it would have helped the movie a lot more, honestly, especially since you said those characters can't even compare. Yeah. And like I do like the scene a lot where she's interviewing the three of them for the first time.
Oh yeah, that's great. Like there's some really intriguing, there's some really intriguing stuff in the beginning, but once you have
it got repetitive after a while.
Yeah, after like the third or fourth scene of her being like, oh, this isn't real, like it got very annoying after a while. And look, there are actually some really interesting points that she does bring up. Like she brings up the idea in the scene where it's just the three of them of like, how, if there are more superheroes in the world, how can it just be the three of you? And that is something that is actually really interesting. Why are there only three superhumans? You know, why are they the only ones? I do think that's actually a really interesting idea. And I like the fact that she did bring that up. The scenes that she has, you know, with David Dunn and Kevin on their own are really well set up. It's more after those scenes, that's when I started to have a problem with her. And especially once the twist is revealed, which, you know, we've basically covered pretty much everything. I think we might as well just jump into the ending, because that's the thing that a lot of people are very divided on here. And understandably, because it does not end the way you expect it to. And M. Night makes a lot of bold choices here. And again, I admire a lot of the choices he makes in this final scene, you know, in this whole climax that we get. It's just the way some of it was done was just a little clumsy to me. The first thing I'm going to bring up, and I don't know if this was a huge problem for you, it seems to not be a huge problem for everyone, but the comic book comparisons really started to get annoying after a while. Just constantly comparing, oh, this is what happens in a comic book, so this, and then this is what's happening. It was just so on the nose. Like, I get what you're trying to say. I'm not stupid, and I felt like I was being talked down to at points. I really felt like they were trying to just really force that idea down your throat that this is what happens in a comic book. And it's not like that throughout the whole movie. It's really just that climax. That's when it really started to feel the way, especially when you have that goofy scene of like Joseph being like, Kevin's father wasn't wasn't just on any train. In comics, this is what happens. Like, it just got a little too goofy for me. And I wasn't really the biggest fan of that. Again, I like the idea that they're going to a comic store and they're seeing, you know, what happens in a comic book, and they're realizing, holy shit, that's what's happening to, you know, said character right now. I like that idea a lot. But I just thought the comic book comparisons overall just got a little tiresome after a while.
Yeah, I can understand that complaint. I know that you're not the only one who has that complaint. I've heard other people say the same thing about the dialogue. Personally, though, I never found myself bothered with it. Yeah, sometimes we got a little bit too on the nose, but it didn't really it wasn't like a huge impact for me where I was like, okay, let's not do this anymore. At least for me. But and the third act, because that's where it seems like people are divided. It's the third act. It's like the last 20 minutes of the movie to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the only other thing to talk about, I forgot to bring this up. Something else that I didn't get to say in my review, because it is a spoiler, is there are flashbacks or basically deleted scenes of Unbreakable in this movie, and I thought that was actually
right. Yeah.
Did that, especially when it came to the scene with Mr. Glass. I really like the scene where he's on the roller coaster and you see, you know, how it's like affecting him. I thought that was actually a really powerful scene, and it was really cool the way they did that, because these are clearly scenes that M. Night wanted to put in there, but he didn't, and instead he uses it as a point of reference for these characters, something that they can remember when they're in really dire scenarios. You know, when Mr. Glass's mother, you know, she's hearkening back to a certain time, you know, a very traumatic time in her life. I thought that was really effective. And then, of course, with David, him remembering this really nice moment between him and his son, stuff like that. I really honestly would have wanted a little bit more of that. I think they did a really good job with doing that. I know some people thought that was motion capture, and it's not. They already confirmed that those are deleted scenes that weren't in the film. And I thought it was really cool the way they did that. I haven't really seen a film do something quite like that before, and I actually thought that was very nicely done.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, and if that was motion capture, then that would be like the best motion capture of all time.
Oh, it'd be like on par with like Michael Douglas and Ant-Man and things like that.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I thought the way they incorporated those flashback scenes were perfect. I liked the one specifically with Bruce Willis and his son, where he's like, I can go to sleep now because I know the truth about you. I thought that scene was very effective.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, and the Sam Jackson one when he's a kid. That scene was devastating to watch, honestly. I mean,
yeah, it was definitely like
bones crack as he's like, oh my god, that was awful.
Yeah, it's one of those things where obviously you know he is the villain, but it gets you to really care for him. And also that leads me to my one other complaint with this movie that I didn't bring up. I did touch upon it in my review, but we're all waiting for that confrontation between David Dunn and between Mr. Glass. And aside from that one scene, which is really well done, you know, the scene where he's like, you know, all these people are going to die if you don't open that door. That's a really great scene. However, I wish there was another scene before that. I wish there was a scene where Mr. Glass finds a way to talk to David Dunn and they just talk things out. They talk about how David knows, you know, what Mr. Glass has done. He knows what he's done, because we're all waiting for that big sort of confrontation between them. I mean, that's the one thing everyone remembers from Unbreakable, is that amazing twist that just recontextualizes everything. It makes you look at Mr. Glass in a completely different way. And we just never got that. And I think there was a huge missed opportunity. I love the stuff we got with Mr. Glass and Kevin, but I wish that the interactions were just as strong with Mr. Glass and David. The only instance we get is when David sees him coming into the room and he's like, oh, this is the guy that killed a bunch of people on a train. Like, that's all we really get. And I'm sorry, for a film that was a 19-year wait, that was not very satisfying. I think they could have done a little bit better with that.
Yeah, and like I said, I can understand that. I can understand that for sure. Actually, I was gonna ask you about one thing about because in the end of Split, right? They kind of set up a mystery of what's going to happen between Anya Taylor-Joy and her stepfather. You know, her stepfather who.
Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about that. Yeah, I like that actually.
But how did you find it, like in the movie where they just say that the uncle was in jail? Did you find that a little disappointing? Were you hoping you would see more?
No, I like that. I like that we saw that because it wasn't her movie. Like she's still a part of it, but it's not her movie. Split was her movie basically. Like she was like sure James McAvoy is part of it, but she was basically the main character in that movie. And we've already seen her overcome her arc. So I like seeing that. It showed that, you know, she has progressed since the events of Split, and it was a nice way of showing that things are getting better for her. Things have actually changed for the better. You know, she's in a family that is a lot more loving and things like that. You know, we do get it. We don't see a ton of that, but we get the sense that her life is a lot better. And Kevin has actually been a big part of that. He's gotten her to want to stand up for herself more and want to speak her mind. And I really like seeing that. It did show her progression quite nicely. And I've heard a lot of people say that they don't understand the impact that Kevin has had on Casey. And here's the thing. You need to take the beast out of the conversation. That is one of 23 personalities. Kevin Wendell Crumb on his own, Casey admires because she knows the type of person that he really is. The reason they have that connection is because Kevin is someone who was also abused, just like Casey was, and they're always going to be connected in that way. So I really don't know why people are complaining about, oh, how are these two connected after only like 3 days? Like, that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, Casey, the reason why they had that connection is Casey never found someone who had as much trauma as she did. And because of that, that's why they have that really strong connection there. And that was one of my favorite things about Split, is how, while all of the other girls were freaking out about what was going on, Casey was someone who remained quite composed because, as I said in my review for Split, she's faced way worse trauma than what the Beast was doing to her. And I think they showed that. I thought that was actually a really well done scene. And it made sense, like I said, simply because it's not her movie. And she was in a lot more than I was expecting, which I really enjoyed. I didn't think Casey was going to be in a lot. In fact, I really thought the only scenes we were going to get of her is when she hears about the Beast, and then when she goes to, you know, when she hears about Kevin being in the institution, then she goes to see him. I really thought that was going to be it from her, but I was glad to see that she had a lot more to do, and I think that they did way more than I expected, and I was very happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
I know that's something I read a few times.
Yeah, same. I've heard a lot of complaints about that, and I don't really, you know, I don't really understand that, like why people are complaining. Like I feel like it's kind of like you don't need to see everything. Like I always say, show not tell, but that's one of those things where like we don't really need to see that. Like we know things are getting better for Casey. They inferred that at the end of Split, and it was a nice way of showing the progression of her character, and I really did appreciate that. With all that said, though, we got to jump into this ending because it is absolutely insane. I mean, there are about 3 or 4 twists that go on in this ending. It does not go the way you may have expected. It may not have gone the way you wanted to. For me, at least, there are a lot of things I like about this ending, and then there are a lot of things that I don't like about this ending. I already touched upon the comic book stuff, which I wasn't a huge fan of. The stuff that I did really like is the actual twist in this movie. Now, prior to this, a lot of people were speculating that Kevin's father was actually on the train, was on the same train that, you know, killed all those other people. You know, it wasn't just any train. This was not confirmed, but it was something that a lot of people thought was going to happen. And at the time I said, nah, that's just too far-fetched. There's no way they're going to do that. It doesn't make any sense. But the way it was done actually makes a lot of sense here. And it also really earns the movie its title of Glass, because we realize that not only is Mr. Glass someone who made David Dunn the superhero that he is, he also made Kevin into the villain that he is. And this was all something that he orchestrated on his own. And I thought that was just brilliant. Like the scene where he talks about how it was always his plan to make, you know, David the hero and to make Kevin the villain is just fantastic. I love the way it was done. It shows that I think this was something that M. Night probably wanted to do in Unbreakable, because he has said before that he wanted Kevin's character to be an Unbreakable, but he cut him out because the movie was unfortunately too long. You know, the movie would have been too long and probably too convoluted if he did that, which was a smart decision. But to me, this feels like that big twist that he has been waiting to do since Unbreakable, and I'm very happy he could do that. I think it was a great moment for, like I said, Mr. Glass. It shows how he basically is responsible for every single event that has played out so far, and that's really why the movie is called Glass. Sure, he may not be the central character, but he really is the cause of basically everything, and that's something that I really did love seeing. But what do you want to say about that twist overall?
That again?
Oh, what do you want to say about the twist of Mr. Glass creating both Kevin and David and that whole thing that happens?
Well, I thought that was awesome. It shows how great of a villain Mr. Glass is. I mean, he was great in original, but this movie I think solidifies that he's probably going to go down as one of the best movie villains of all time. It really shows how he really is the brains of the operation. Like, yeah, we know this, but really you find that out and you're like, wow. So he was really planning this all along. And I guess we're going to talk about a little bit more of the ending when you find out he really is the brains because he thought of everything. But yeah, I thought that was really, really cool. And I like that how they incorporated that with Kevin's father being on the train. Yeah, sure, maybe the dialogue was handled a little better with the son saying it.
That was really it. Like for the most part, I thought his son was really good, but that was the only scene with him where it was just a little like, okay, you're over. It didn't really work as well. But
right. But no, like, I thought that twist worked really well. And then that's when the show, because after that, you know, Samuel L. Jackson, the Beast is like, well, I can't trust you. Breaks like 4 or 5 of his bones, and then he just falls, and then he breaks more bones.
Yeah, and, so I guess
the showdown happens, which isn't really much of a showdown, which I think is going to be an interesting conversation because I feel like that's where a lot of people were kind of like, well, wait, this is what it led up to, this showdown. A lot of people were disappointed. Now, I want to ask you, what did you think of that? Like, of that brief mini fight? Were you disappointed that it wasn't a bigger fight or anything like that?
I wasn't so disappointed with the fights. I actually really did like the fight a lot, and I thought it was pretty much what we needed, like seeing the Beast realize that, you know, Mr. Glass is responsible for what he's become. And especially that moment where the Beast realizes, holy shit, not only, you know, is Mr. Glass responsible for what happened to Kevin, but I would not have to be here if it wasn't for Mr. Glass. The Beast would not exist if it was for Mr. Glass. And seeing the Beast actually not want to exist because he knows that he's hurting Kevin was a great moment, because up to this point, Beast is someone who was just very evil and someone who was just he really just seemed to have no regard for anyone. And to see him in that moment realize that, you know, his whole mission was to protect Kevin, and that by him, you know, becoming the Beast, he's inadvertently ruining that, I thought was incredible. I love that revelation. I love seeing him wailing on Mr. Glass. What I did have a problem with are the deaths, which I think we'll just jump into it. I'll say right now, the best one was Kevin's, easily.
Kevin's, yeah, for sure.
Was fantastic. I honestly, that's the one that got me closest to tears. I didn't cry or anything, but it definitely got me close to it. Like, I did get a bit choked up. The scene between him and Anya Taylor-Joy, it was very well handled. Seeing Casey at his side and him, you know, circling through all those different personalities, eventually dying as Hedwig, which I thought made a lot of sense because, you know, her and Hedwig definitely had the strongest connection. It's either Hedwig or Kevin. I mean, I think Kevin is really who she was truly like enamored by because, again, of the tragedy that he's gone through. But when, you know, Hedwig, that's the person she shared the most interactions with. And I thought it was very appropriate the way that was done. Just everything about that scene I thought was very well handled. James McAvoy was just so incredible in that scene. And out of all the deaths, that one was the most earned. It made sense. You know, the Beast realized that he didn't really have a reason to live anymore because of what he was doing to Kevin. Kevin didn't even really want to be there because, again, he doesn't want himself to be in control of everything, even though Casey's telling him, no, you can be in control. He doesn't know how to do that. He doesn't want to be in control because, again, he doesn't want to have to face the real version of himself, which I think he's honestly kind of ashamed by. And the other personalities, because of that, just don't have a reason to exist. So everything about that death was very well earned. It made sense why they shot him, obviously, because again, it's this idea that he is this weapon and that he is this just huge force of nature that just exudes so much terror and so much anger and things like that. When in reality, again, the Beast is someone who is not nearly as bad as he seems. He's someone who is just now realizing his purpose, and I really did love seeing that. I thought everything about his death was great, and for me, easily was one of the best scenes of the entire film. There are some things I do have to complain about, but if there's anything they did correctly, it was absolutely Kevin's death.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it was the most impactful out of the three.
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Now the other deaths, on the other hand, I will say Mr. Glasses, I do like. I like the idea that all his bones end up breaking and things like that, and his mother's at his side. For me, just the way it happened, I just thought was a little bit choppy. I think the way that they could have done it, it could have been done a little bit better. And at that point, it took him so long to die as well that it wasn't as effective as I think it could have been. And for a character like Mr. Glass, who I really have, you really do care about, and they really do a good job of fleshing him out in the movie. I just didn't get that sense of impact that I really wanted. It's not as bad as the other thing we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I did not get that sense of impact that I wanted. I like the moment with his mother, and I like when he dies. I like the final words, especially where he says, this was never supposed to be, a climax. It was never supposed to be a battle. It was an origin story. Because in many ways, that's what his goal was. His whole idea is that he wanted people to accept superheroes. And that really plays into the message of the film, which we'll get into a little bit later, which I really do love. But that was his goal, was to, let people know about superheroes, open up the world to them, and he did succeed at that, and I thought that was very good. Again, I just thought his death itself was just a little messy in its execution, and, Sam Jackson absolutely killed it for sure. He was incredible in that scene, but just the way that it all happened, it was just a little too slow for me. He took a little too long to die. It wasn't like, say, Walking Dead level where Carl takes an entire episode to die. It just was a little too slow for me.
Yeah, I actually didn't mind Glass's death. I thought that was pretty well.
Yeah, I want to reiterate, I liked it. It just, for a character like that who has gone through so much suffering and who we've done basically, so much time fleshing out, I just feel like I should have felt a little bit more, and I didn't really feel much.
That's understandable, but I like the line of dialogue with his mother, where he's like, "I was not a mistake," and she's like, "No, you were." What did she say? She was like, she said something. She's like, "No, you're a genius," or something. She said something like that, but I thought that was really well handled.
Yeah, that was really well done too, because it showed that even though his mother knows that he's not really a great person, she's still always on his side, and she was one of the only people that believed in him throughout this entire thing. And when everyone else just looked at him as this mistake, as this person who is just useless because he's in a wheelchair, she always saw him in a different light, and that's something that I did really like seeing. The worst one, easily. What?
I was gonna say, it was disappointing that the line in the trailer, where she's like, they always underestimate the mastermind. That wasn't in the movie.
That wasn't in the movie, yeah.
And I was like, oh, that was a great line in the trailer. I was like, I wish
I think I attest that to, again, M. Night deciding to make the film the length it was, because he said originally it was 3 hours and 20 minutes, and I assume that there probably will be an extended cut on the Blu-ray, which I am more than open to watching. For sure.
I would watch it too, yeah, same.
I think there's a lot of stuff that they did cut out that they should not have cut out. But I'm more than certain that that line is probably in that extended cut. But we get to the thing that really did bother me, and that's David's death. Look, I get what they were trying to do here. I get that they were trying to have all of them die to like serve this message, and they do a good job with that. But considering the lack of depth and the lack of focus that David has in the movie, there was no reason for him to die. No reason whatsoever. And the way he dies, I thought was honestly really dumb. So, okay, I get it that he has this fear of water. I get it that that's his one weakness, but just think about this. How much better would it have been if in that scene with Sarah Paulson, where he realizes her devious intent and things like that, where he somehow outsmarts her and he somehow finds a way to survive being submerged in water and he actually overcomes his weakness? I think would have been an incredible scene, and I would have loved to see that happen. And I think it would have been a great a great capper for him. You could have still had him die. You still could have taken him out, but just see him overcome it. And, maybe he gets taken out another way. Maybe he gets shot or something like that. I don't know. You still could have had him die. Maybe he's just like exhausted because he's now overcome his greatest fear and things like that. But it just did not feel impactful at all. There was the fact it's also this tiny puddle, not even a big one, a tiny puddle of water that kills him, I thought was ridiculous. And I was not at all happy with the way it was done. I honestly didn't think he was dead at first. I'm like, there's no way they're going to kill him in a tiny puddle of water. But no, they did. And it did not work for me at all. I think it would have made much more sense for him to overcome his weakness and add on to that for him to actually see Robin Wright as he's dying. I think it would have been far more effective, and I think they really dropped the ball on that one.
Yeah, his death did feel unearned, especially since he didn't really have much to do with this movie. Like I said, they set him up well. It's like, okay, this is what he's up to, but then that was pretty much it. Like he's kind of like in the background for the rest of the movie. And but then again, like I do understand that. I do kind of feel the same way, but at the same time, it's not something I expected Shyamalan to do. So
yeah, same. Like again, you still could have killed him, but just the way it was done was not well earned at all. And again, it especially plays into the whole him not having an arc. Him overcoming his fear of water would have been an amazing moment, and I think they really messed up on that. Also, forgot to touch upon this. There was one moment in my review where I said I wish they would have played the Unbreakable score. There are two specific times I think they could have done that. His death being one of them. The other time when he gets that costume, when he gets the costume from the mental institution, I would have loved if they just played the Unbreakable score there. You didn't have to play it throughout the entire movie because I love the score in the film overall. But I would have loved if they played just a little cue of the Unbreakable score there. I think that was definitely something they should have done, and it's something that people probably wanted to see. And I was a little let down they didn't do that. But again, it was more due to the fact that he just had so little development and he had so little to do in this movie that killing him off just did not work. And again, it goes back to the whole adding 20 minutes, giving him more to do. Okay, maybe I would have bought into it, but considering he had jack shit to do in this movie once they got to the institution, I just didn't feel anything. I was like, no, don't. You're not. No, there's no way he's gonna die. Again, I really did not think they were going to kill him. I thought for a second they maybe he'd outsmart Sarah Paulson, but it didn't happen, and I was very disappointed by that. It did not work for me.
Maybe the extended cut would make us feel differently about his death.
Yeah, again,
maybe I don't know, maybe not, but yeah. Even though it's 2 hours and because it's a long movie, it's like 2 hours and 10 minutes or something.
Yeah,
and I still feel like because I was never really bored with the movie.
No, definitely. Like I don't like it's a slow movie, but there was never really a point for me where I was not into it. Like even the Sarah Paulson scenes, I was into it pretty much for the long haul because I expected some sort of payoff in the ending, and we did to a degree get that, just not with Bruce Willis's character at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, and I imagine because I didn't wait for this movie for 19 years. Because I saw Unbreakable again like a couple years ago. So, but I can see how people who were waiting for that long could be disappointed with the way David Dunn died and how they handled the character. Or maybe some people feel differently. I don't know, but I imagine for them they'd be more pissed off than anyone.
Oh yeah, no, same. I saw the movie back in 2015 as well, so I didn't wait those 19 years either. It certainly feels like 19 years because you know how long it was since I saw Unbreakable. But you know, honestly, I just wish they could have executed that a lot better. And then let's just talk about the whole message of the movie. The message of the film, I really do like this idea that essentially, people who are viewed in a certain way, people, we're going to call people in and they're going to get very sort of dogmatic and militaristic. They're going to try to convince them that what they are thinking or how they feel isn't right. And you can draw a lot of parallels, obviously, to like the real world today. There's a lot of various groups that are probably like that. But again, the main message that he's really trying to give is that we should not try to make people repress these demons. We should instead have them accept it and be more open to it. And I really do love that message. I really do like what he's trying to say there. I think it makes a lot of sense for the types of, for both of these films, especially like I said, what they did with Kevin's character made a lot of sense to do that. And I really do enjoy that message a lot. It's just that message itself, the David Dunn death kind of ruins that a little bit for me. And I think they could have handled that a little bit better. The ending itself, the way things ended, I was a fan of. I like the idea that they were duped by Mr. Glass, that he was always one step ahead of them. I don't think the dialogue need to be as on the nose as it was, where she's like, oh, did anyone download the files? And they're like, oh, what could have happened? Like, okay, we know what happened. Like, you don't need to tell me every single thing that happened in my face. It's not that complicated. But yes, Mr. Glass has downloaded all the footage. It's now been given to Casey, Joseph, and his mother, and basically they end up showing it to the world. It ends up blowing up after 2 hours of when they sent it. And again, that is a really good ending. I like the way that whole thing is done. I like the last line that his mom has, where she says this is the beginning of a new universe or something like that. That's a really good way to end the movie. However, I think there is one extra scene that should have been added. And maybe this is just me, because I have not heard a lot of people talk about this. But for me personally, I would have loved it if we end the movie on, we meet this character who also has superpowers. And they maybe have been inspired by David Dunn, Kevin, and Mr. Glass. And we realize that the cycle is just always going to continue. There's always going to be a bad guy. There's always going to be a good guy. And there's always going to be an orchestrator. It's always going to be that way. And I think that would have been an incredible ending. I would have loved if M. Night Shyamalan did that. Again, the ending itself, it is a good one. But I think that extra scene, he could have gone the extra mile and show that this isn't just something that is going to start a new, change the universe. It's going to start a whole universe. People are going to start realizing their powers and tapping into them and things like that. And again, I'm not saying like you want to spin this off. That's not what he's trying to do. I think it just would have shown that this is something that is going to continue and that there's always going to be that good guy, that bad guy, and the orchestrator in there. Even if the bad guy is morally right or the good guy is morally wrong, there's always going to be counterparts like that. And I think that would have been a really cool idea. But overall, the ending itself, I do think is a good one. I just wish that extra scene was added.
Yeah, I was fine with the way it, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like that one thing you're talking about. Doesn't sound like a bad idea, but I personally, at the end, that I was fine with it. So I don't think there's gonna be
I liked it too, but I just feel like it would have just made the movie feel a little bit more impactful, because it felt like there was another scene that could have happened after that, and there just wasn't. Overall, though, like I said, at the end of the day, still a really good movie, a film that I think I'm going to go back to and probably like even more on a second watch. I do definitely want to rewatch it for sure. It's just the lack of screen time with David Dunn and things like that. That is what is a little bit bothersome. It's a movie where the things that are so good make the things that aren't as good really, really frustrating, because there's so much great stuff in this movie. All of the acting is great. David Dunn, again, great character, but not in the movie that much. The whole idea with him seeing his wife. I mean, there's so many various things they could have done with that. I know I keep going on about David Dunn, but he's supposed to be one of the three leads, and it doesn't feel that way. It feels like the leads in this movie are James McAvoy, Samuel Jackson, and Sarah Paulson, and that's not how it should be. It should be the other way around, and I definitely think they could have given him a lot more to do. Again, at the end of the day, I still really do enjoy it. I definitely do want to see it again. And I do admire M. Night for going in this direction. It's one that a lot of people might not like. And I myself, there are quite a few things that, like I said, I didn't like, but there's more I like than things I don't. And again, I can't help but applaud him for going into a direction that people do not expect. You know, there's so many superhero movies that go in so many formulaic directions, and you never really see something quite like this before. And I personally haven't seen something quite like this before in any superhero film of this scale. And I really do applaud him for doing that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you.
Yeah, so I think we basically said all we need to. Overall, like I said, I enjoyed it a lot. It's definitely a very well done film. I can absolutely understand the criticism. If you didn't like the film, I get it. It's a different type of film. It's not for everyone for sure. It's a lot slower. You know, there's a lot to like about it, but if you don't like slower films, my question is, how do you like Unbreakable and Split? Like, those are slow films and people like that. So I don't know why people are so, you know, like, oh, why is this such a slow film? Because for me, it didn't feel nearly as slow. If anything, I thought the first like 20 to 30 minutes was a little rushed. But overall, still a really well done film. I really enjoyed doing this spoiler video. I liked getting to have this conversation for sure. I think it's a conversation that a lot of people are going to have. And I think that's what M. Night was trying to do. I think he was trying to start a conversation, and he definitely did succeed at that. But before we go here, any closing remarks?
Yeah, overall, I like the film a lot. I'll be doing a spoiler free review tomorrow on my channel. But yeah, I like the film a lot. For me, yeah, there are some negatives, but for me, the positives outweigh the negatives easily.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are things that I can understand that divide for some people, and some of the choices I did like and was on board with, and some of them maybe not so much. I do want to see it again too, just to see if my thoughts would still be the same, or maybe there'd be something that I didn't appreciate the first time. I don't know, or maybe vice versa. But in any case, I'll give it like an A-. I thought it was really good. Just only a couple of things hold me back from saying like this is the perfect conclusion to a trilogy. So.
Yeah, like I said, my review, it's a B- for me. I could end up upping it to a B or even a B+, who knows? But either way, guys, that's it for our spoiler review of Glass. Let us know what you guys thought of this movie overall. Feel free to talk spoilers in the comments, of course, because, of course, this is a spoiler review. I would expect you to do with that and not on the non-spoiler one. Of course, check out Diego's channel. He's going to be doing a Glass review, so definitely look forward to that. That's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.